Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics. In this video we're going to talk about shooting comped and or ported handguns in low and no light conditions. Oh shit. Everything's cyclical, right? Topics keep coming back up or we get into specific details about a topic. Recently, on social media, the internet, and some videos and some general discussion among professional peer communities, using a ported or a comped gun under low light conditions is one you can come up because there's a small minority of instructors out there who don't like them. And that's fine. Not liking something is very natural, actually. I don't like a lot of things. But if you don't like something and you're trying to steer people away from using it, it's probably best to know what the fuck you're talking about. That doesn't mean that they don't necessarily know what they're talking about, but I can only go with what they've put on the internet. Things have to have context. There was a picture floating around featuring a comped, I believe it was a Glock. No, sorry, a ported Glock, which Glock calls the C model. It was 17C, maybe a 19C. And it showed a still photographer of the flash coming out. I believe Larry Vickers shared it. Some other people did too. And that was given as reason for why you shouldn't carry one of those, because that might happen. One thing about the photo, if you use a little bit of critical thinking, is the only thing that can be seen is the gun. Which means everything beyond the gun is completely black as far as I can tell. Now, the photo may have been photoshopped, but if you're using that as an example as to why you shouldn't carry a ported handgun, it'd probably be best to address the other things wrong with what's going on in that photo. Namely, you probably, as the shooter, couldn't see what you were shooting at, so why are you even shooting? This is, of course, my first question, because the thing about low light is if you can't see what you're shooting at, you probably have no business shooting, at least in a general self-defense setting where military might be doing some suppressive fire type stuff. Different conversation for that. Same kind of argument goes along with the lines of, well, don't use a ported gun or a comped gun because of your night sights. And my feeling is, if it's so dark that you need little glowing tritium vials to see your sights, then you probably can't see your threat, unless it's in that twilight condition, which we'll talk specifically about. And I'm not saying that these instructors aren't experienced or reputable or respectable or a wealth of information. What I am saying is everyone can be wrong, myself included. In this particular situation, I wanted to make this video to kind of lay out the case for why you can shoot a comped or a ported gun in low or no light conditions. You will not die in the streets, ruin your night vision equipment, burn out your retinas, or in any way experience any negative effects whatsoever from the muzzle flash of the firearm itself. It's just not, it's not a thing. But first, let's disambiguation. What are we talking about? This is a comped handgun. This is TBCRI, Texas Black Rifle Company's micro comp on an agency Gavel 17. The barrel is compensated. And then we have Glock. This is the 17C, which is, as you can see, ported. I don't know why they call it the C. Maybe they see porting as compensating, which they're not wrong. These guns do operate slightly differently. The biggest difference being that on your comped gun, the gases are used to control the rise of the muzzle as the bullet has already exited the barrel. Whereas on the ported gun, the gases are used to control the rise of the muzzle as the bullet is exiting. Before the bullet is technically uncorked, gas is able to come out of those ports, which, and I'll probably get into depth in a future video, the pros and cons of one or the other. One, it's going to put that gas arguably up in your sight line. And two, it may steal some muzzle velocity away from you, but again, I'll talk about that more in depth in a separate video. There's nothing wrong using either of these firearms in low light conditions if you are obeying the natural rules and the 4 fundamental firearms rules and using the guns in general. The information in this video is going to be somewhat anecdotal because it's not taking place in a scientific environment, but it will take place in the environment as well as I can control it here on the range. I'm going to be using 4 different guns. I'm going to be using a standard Glock 17 profile with an OEM barrel. There's had some framework done to it, some internal weight, and it's got aftermarket sights. Other than that, is pretty much OEM performance. Then I'm going to be using a completely OEM Glock 17C, that ported gun that I showed you. I'm also going to be using the Agency Arms 17 length in the Gavel package with, like I already showed you, the Texas Black Rifle Company micro comp, and I'm going to be using a second Agency Arms with Agency's 417 comp. All these guns are 17 in length. 2 of them have OEM barrels. Obviously, for the 2 comped guns, I needed threaded barrels for the application of the comp, so those barrels are not OEM. However, it's kind of getting into the minutia of things because slightly different barrel profiles for the purposes of threading are not really going to change what kind of muzzle flash we get. Not that I'm aware of in any barrel I'm familiar with. Now specifically the premise. The premise is that using a comped and or ported handgun in low light conditions will kill your night vision or somehow otherwise create a negative effect, as we already talked about. In this video I'll lay out why that's probably not going to happen to you if you're doing everything else that you're supposed to be doing in regards to a self-defense shooting, be that under low light conditions or night vision conditions. I'll be using those 4 guns, and I'll be shooting 3 different types of ammunition to show the muzzle signature of each under 3 different types of low to no light. I'll be using a standard reloaded ammunition, which is 124 grain from LAX. I chose this round because it is kind of peppy. It's got a little bit of a muzzle signature, probably because of the powder that they use. Second round I'll be using is a very popular self-defense round, 147 grain HST. And then I'll be using 124 grain plus P because some people think the plus P is going to give you a greater muzzle signature. And the 124 grain plus P is very popular among people who shoot comp guns, especially guys who shoot the Roland Special, which is a 19 comp. I'm using all 17s for this because I didn't have enough 19s that were comparable enough to make a reasonable anecdotal comparison. So we're going to look at these guns under 3 different reduced lighting conditions. Obviously, I didn't really see any reason to shoot it in daylight because an argument's never really been made muzzle signature wise against those guns in daylight conditions. So I'm going to shoot in natural twilight / reduced lighting. Then I'm going to shoot in no light, and then I'm going to shoot under night vision. All 4 guns, all 4 configurations, 3 different types of ammunition through each gun. You'll be looking at 5 rounds per ammunition type per gun. Natural twilight conditions, sunset. That period of time, depending on where you are geographically in the United States and based on the ambient weather conditions, and specifically where you are, being if you're urban or more rural, you have a period of light which is known as mesopic light, where the natural sun, the sun itself, Bob, the big orange ball, has gone away, and the light is failing, but it hasn't become what's known as dark yet. We haven't got to that scotopic light yet. Easiest way to tell the difference between mesopic and scotopic, mesopic light is lack of direct sunlight and a reduced visual clarity, but you still have color vision. Scotopic light is where you lose your color vision, or you lose a significant amount of the ability to perceive depth and color. In a scotopic environment, if I don't have a white light source available to me, or I don't have sufficient ambient lighting, which would probably bring us back to mesopic or even all the way photopic, which is daytime, I probably shouldn't be shooting anyway. If I can't see my threat, I probably can't see my sights. If I can't see my sights, I probably can't see my threat. Now, in mesopic lighting, night sights actually work pretty well. As the light fails and gets closer and closer to darkness, that scotopic lighting, the night sights are actually very, very beneficial for shooting in those natural light conditions. Now, those light conditions can also take place artificially in very dimly lit parking garages, indoors, things like that, where there's enough light to make out and positively identify my target, but it's hard for me to differentiate between the depths of my sight from my rear to my front to get my proper alignment. Best night sights out there going, MRDS, put a red dot on your handgun. You never have to worry about night sights again because they make the best night sight. Different conversation. So if I'm able to PID my threat in this twilight condition, or another example would be maybe there's enough ambient light because of the parking lot, overhead lights, maybe I've got some aluminum highlight or even some sodium lighting that gives, I don't need an actual physical light source, be it a weapon mounted light or a handheld light. I can see that's my threat, I need to shoot this guy. Is that going to create a problem? Muzzle flash, is it going to create a problem and kind of keep me from being able to see my threat? My hypothesis, even though I already know this, but I'm just making the video to prove it, is no, because light moves at the speed of light. And muzzle flash is light. And without an additional ignition source or fuel to burn during that chemical process of the bullet being fired, once the flash happens, it's over. It's done. And I would submit to the average shooter that you won't have even settled from recoil until after the muzzle flash has long since dissipated from your shot. But again, that can be an individual skill level thing, can be a gun thing, depending on caliber and all these other factors can play into that. So I won't say definitively that that's the case, but muzzle flash happens pretty damn quick. And if I have enough natural lighting to see my target, my threat, I'm probably not going to create any significant drawback to my night vision or my eye's natural attenuation to the lighting conditions to create any problems with that muzzle flash, or have any problems created by that muzzle flash, I should say. So that's kind of my hypothesis going into the video. Now, I'm going to be filming all these shots with the Sony Alpha 7S. I'm bringing this up for the people who are a little more technically minded because cameras do not necessarily replicate what the human eye sees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make manual adjustments on the camera, which I'll put at the bottom of the screen, and I'll use the same setting for every single condition in the three environments, or I should say the two environments I'm going to shoot in. Obviously under night vision, I'm not going to have to, I won't be filming with that camera. I'll be using actually an iPhone. It's one of the best ways to film through a Viper with a 4GS Photonis tube. But I'll bring up the camera specifically to say that I'm going to make sure that the settings are exactly the same for every condition, so there's no tweaking of things. Now for the Twilight portion, the mesopic lighting portion, we will literally just be shooting with the aid of the visible light we have left to us provided by the environment that we're in. Because there will be enough lighting in that Twilight, and I'll specifically put on the bottom of the screen what sunset was and when this took place for those people, again, who are very technically minded. Once we get to the low light where we actually need the aid of white light, I will do control shots so you can see how bad the muzzle flash would be if you irresponsibly fired your gun without being able to PID your target. And that's usually the pictures that people take because from a photography standpoint, it looks super cool to catch all that massive muzzle flash. We've been doing it with rifles forever. Everybody thinks muzzle flash is like the coolest thing ever. When in actuality, when you think about the nature of firearms and what we're doing with them, it's probably not a good thing. But when it comes to handguns, lower pressure gases, slower rounds, we don't have to worry about muzzle flash nearly as much as we would, say, on an AR, especially like an SBR. And the advantages of porting handguns and comped handguns can, to me, significantly outweigh, depending on your context and what you want the weapon to do, going with an OEM traditional. That's not to say that you can't carry, like you have to carry a comped or ported handgun. I'm certainly not setting out to say that. What I'm setting out to say is you can carry one, and it's not going to be a negative. So up first, here's our Twilight conditions. The sun has set. It's been down for some time. And we're going to run through 3 different types of ammunition, like I said earlier, in all 4 configurations of guns. We'll be using 124 grain LAX reloaded 9mm, 147 grain HST, and then the 124 grain plus P gold dot in that order. 5 rounds, there'll be a pause between each 5-round string, so you can kind of get an appreciation for what you see and what you saw and what's coming next. I'm not blind. So those were our Twilight conditions. Now you could find yourself well after sunset in an environment that provides that much light. Again, large urban areas, street lights, especially areas that have high quality street lights, the aluminum halide versus the sodium, and then there's all kinds of different types. Basically the yellow lighting is the cheapest and usually provides the least amount of color clarity and assistance with actually being able to see specific fine detail. Now if you have a weapon light, kind of inconsequential because you have the ability to provide your own light. If you carry a handheld light like you should, you have the ability to provide your own light. That environment shouldn't be necessarily detrimental, but I wanted to cover it specifically because it's a lighting condition that's very, very common, and I kind of wanted to lay the groundwork going into what's considered low to no light conditions. Now, this is the specific topic of contention, low light. The lack of significant natural and or artificial lighting to allow positive identification of your threat. Remember, very early in the video I mentioned that photograph that had been going around of the ported handgun and how it just pretty much was very artistic in nature because if you look at when the gun was being shot, probably wasn't a responsible time to shoot a gun because you couldn't see anything downrange from the firearm, which meant there probably wasn't enough lighting, be it artificial or natural lighting, for the shooter to actually PID what he was shooting at. in a very controlled manner, I'm going to demonstrate the zero light as much as I can make it. There's still going to be some ambient lighting. Weather conditions are overcast, but it's well dark. It's actually 3.5 hours past sunset when these shots were fired and this was filmed. On a controlled closed range, just so there's no issues with that. Target was verified prior to firing, prior to going lights out. Camera settings for the purposes of filming this are going to remain the same for all 4 guns. So you're going to get a look at the muzzle signature for all 3 types of ammunition on all 4 guns if you were to shoot them without the aid of light. Now I have to underscore this. In this situation, you probably would not be shooting anyway unless you were using night vision because you can't see your threat. There's no ability to get a PID. Even if you were able to make out a silhouette or a shadow, it's still a good idea for litigation's sake and just some people's moral peace of mind to actually know what you're shooting at. And these types of lighting environments occur quite frequently, every day, I should say every night, and can occur even in broad daylight inside some structures that we have built as man. So this is a control to show you how bad the muzzle flash would be if you were to shoot the gun without the aid of any white light whatsoever. Under those conditions, it was far too dark for me to even use my iron sights, and on the guns that were equipped with an RDS, I could see the dot fine. I just couldn't see what was downrange to positively identify it as what I should be shooting at. So the argument, I guess, could be made that the muzzle flash kept me from being able to see my target, but then the lighting conditions kept me from being able to see my target clearly and being able to PID my target before I even pressed the first round downrange. So that was just control. Now, what about if I shoot with the aid of white light? And finally, and hopefully in my attempt to put this to bed, I'm going to use the weakest light source I have available to me, which is the flashlight app on my iPhone 8. Thanks, Steve Jobs. Now, the night vision portion is anecdotal to anecdotal, because the only guns I have that I can shoot under night vision without actually being able to aim are the guns that have MRDS, which they're both comped. The Agency Arms 417 comp and the Texas Black Rifle Co. micro comp. But I'm going to show those 2 guns under night vision just to show that you can shoot comped guns under night vision just fine. Unfortunately, I'm not able to shoot the 17C under night vision this time because I don't have one that's milled for a red dot, and I don't have an IR pistol laser because I don't like them. So this portion of the video is like super anecdotal because we're not comparing all 4 guns at this point. We're just literally looking at two comped guns, and I'm shooting them under night vision. Again, to do this is just to show that it can be done. It's not that big of a deal. In fact, to me, it's very beneficial to shoot a comped gun under night vision versus an uncomped gun because my muzzle gases are controlled, and they aid, obviously the whole purpose of them is to get my muzzle flatter sooner so I can get back on target. Using a red dot under night vision on a handgun is the way to shoot handguns under night vision if you have to. It overcomes any kind of tricks or techniques that have been developed with the use of tritium sights or aiming lasers on pistols, which I just can't stand. So if you're going to shoot pistols under night vision, this is the way to do it. And this is kind of just anecdotal evidence that you can in fact shoot under night vision with a handgun, with a comp on it, and it won't kill your night vision, it won't auto-gate your night vision, and you'll still be able to hit what you're aiming at. I certainly hope that this makes my case, or at least I provided information there for you to kind of judge for yourself. Anytime someone posts an opinion in a video or a photograph or a post, one way or the other, critical thinking should be applied to see if their context is correct. I don't think anyone did it maliciously. I don't think anybody's being malicious when they're speaking in the negative or in the positive about any one particular configuration of a handgun for use in low light conditions. Specifically talking about this, but any other topic, be it rifle length, muzzle device, flashlight, anything like that. You shouldn't take on 100% face value what you hear without being able to, at least in some way, independently verify it for yourself. Verify, then trust, that kind of thing. And sometimes the source of the information gives us pause in doubting it because you're like, well, this guy's done all this cool stuff in his career, so why would I? He knows exactly what he's talking about. It's not always the case. You can have someone who has a really good resume in their specific field and their very specific focus, but they might not have as much experience outside of that, and we as the shooting community tend to forget that sometimes. And this isn't about any one specific person who's had bad things to say about comps, bad things to say about ported handguns. It's just me putting this information out there because I spend a lot of time shooting under night vision. I spend a lot of time shooting in low light. Doesn't mean I necessarily have more time shooting or low light or night vision or anybody else out there, but facts are facts regardless of how often you experience them. And if you've experienced the fact once and then you experience it again and then you experience it again and a pattern starts to form, then that fact just continues to be reiterated and continues to be solidified as a fact. Without a dramatic change in technology, that fact is going to remain a fact. Gunpowder and muzzle signature has gotten better. It certainly hasn't gotten worse. Without your outlayer ammunition that's designed for fun, like that Smoke City round, or even some of your NATO changes over the years, everything's gotten better in regards to how well the QC is and how well powder performs and how well muzzle signatures are reduced just naturally with the powder used, because muzzle signature is not something you necessarily want, but it can be contended with and it can be lived with if there's an advantage to it. The whole purpose of this video is to show that no, you can shoot comped and ported handguns in low light conditions. It's not a big deal if you're using proper technique, good concepts, good principles. So I hope, if nothing else, I've made the case for that. I'm Aaron Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.